Hello, viewers, and welcome to another Consent Dojo. I am delighted that this program continues to go and go and go, and I get to invite really cool people on interesting topics so we can build our consent muscles. Because consent is a daily exercise in small and big ways, and we can't wait until we're getting on with the spicy, sexy, kinky stuff to be considering that. So, everyday aspect. But today, we're actually going to be looping back into the world of sex, but very modern sex. I was at the annual ASEC conference, which is the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, and I saw this interesting presentation, said, an human synthetic relationship. And I'm like, oh, this sounds really interesting. I could go to that, or I could go to erectile dysfunction or something like that, which is not needs experts. I'm not the expert. And I'm like, oh, cool. I had no idea, and I attended, and it was fascinating. And I met this incredibly enthusiastic human from Ohio, she says, or not. We'll find out.
Yep.
And afterwards, I was sitting in the audience going, no, really? What the fuck? Oh, by the way, you can totally swear, okay?
Yay.
What the fuck is going
Yeah.
on? Oh my God. And then I took a chance and said, hey, I got this little thing called Consent Dojo. Want to come on and talk about consent, sex, and human synthetic relationship? So here we go. Let me introduce to you my new friend and colleague, Dr. Markie Twist. Pronoun is she, her, or they, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
mine, she, her. So let's launch into tell us about who the heck are you and what do you do?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Midori, and everybody who's here live and folks who watch afterwards. I am very enthusiastically consenting to be here. I am thrilled. I am excited to introduce myself. And actually, I'm going to invite you to reflect on some questions. Uh, because this is going to be a big part of this whole conversation we're going to have, and then we're going to revisit these questions at the end, and this is how you're also going to get to know a little bit more about me. So ask yourself, like, who are you? What do you do? How does this influence how you see technology? What is your relationship like with technology? What about your relationships with other people in connection with technology? If you're someone who is more of a digisexual or robosexual, you might use language like, how do you see your relationship with synthetics, right? That's a more kind of intimate in-group way of thinking about it. So I'll talk about a little bit where I'm from. I'm actually from Alaska. and, and the thing about being from Alaska is, if you aren't in Alaska and you go anywhere else and you say you're from Alaska, you're going to spend at least 10 to 15 to 20 minutes talking about Alaska with a stranger. And so I have consciously made choices in my life where I tell people I'm from Alaska if I want to invite that conversation. Otherwise, I say Ohio, because as far as it gets is Akron. And then people say, oh, yeah, Akron. And I go, yep. And then maybe they say LeBron James, and I go, yeah, basketball. And that's about as far as that conversation gets, right? But the reason I say it here is because for me, and Midori and I were just talking about this, I grew up not only in Alaska, but in a village on the road system. There was 700 people. It was 75 miles north of Anchorage. Forgive me if you're doing kilometers. I have dyscalculia. Okay. But it was remote. And honestly, there were more moose than people. And so what that means is, in my life, even as a young person, my primary relationship to technology is survival based. Like, I see it as, you need it. Okay, so that's foundational. and wherever you are on the globe, you might think about how that affects how you see your relationship with technology, right? Because to me, it was a lifesaver. Other identities that I think are important in this conversation for me, and you might think about it for yourself. I'm a Gen Xer. I feel like our generation was sort of the last generation that, we grew up with technology, but we didn't have email until like high school or like university for many people if you went that route. And so there's this really lovely balance, I think, for many of us where it's being able to bridge the conversation of before and after, while also being able to translate. So one of the things I'll say to people is like, what's the offline equivalent of that? Okay. And that really is going to matter when we talk about consent and digital health, because the offline equivalent can be a really helpful way to see how important what's happening online is. Because if it happened offline, you'd be like, oh my gosh, right? So I think that lens is helpful for me generationally and speaking to people kind of across generations about these issues. Few other highlights: I'm bisexual, androgynous, kinky, and polyamorous. And so I also see technology, and have since I was a young person, as a really, again, survival. It was a tool to connect with other people. When I was in isolated places, I would still have queer people, right, that I could connect with. The downside to that part is there can be bullying, right? And like visibility management issues. But at the same time, we're back to that original feeling I have about it. I see technology as survival. I see it as adaptive. I, I find a lot of benefit in part because of those identities too. Finally, I think the most important part, which I think might surprise people, is actually I would describe my own relationship with technology as mainly professional, which I know sounds boring. Like, are you kidding? Like, you talk about sex with robots and you're telling me your relationship is mainly professional. And I'm telling you, yeah, we're going to talk about sex with robots, and that's my professional life. I unfortunately don't have the kind of robot that I would like to have in order to have a digisexual relationship. So one day maybe. I mean, I do enjoy technology for pleasure as well, but in general, the bulk of my relationship with technology is kind of boring because it's mainly professional. I will say though that I think what's nice about that is, although I feel really connected to conversations about like digisexuality, I don't necessarily identify that way per se. I think we all use digisexuality to like sex tech to varying degrees, but I wouldn't use that label for myself. And so it kind of creates this feeling of being close to the topic at hand and understanding it, but also being to approach it from a lens, once again, of maybe people that don't understand it, right? Or feel scared, because technophobia is a real thing. A lot of people are very afraid. Okay. And so I want to acknowledge that too. And that's me. That's me in a nutshell, I guess, or me in a web Zoom box.
And thank you. And are you also a practicing clinician or?
Oh, yes. Oh, I can definitely do all the professional information as well. Hold on one second. I have tons of professional context. So actually, I'm teaching faculty in the Department of Applied Psychology in the doctoral and Masters of Arts programs in couple and family therapy and Masters in dance movement art therapy at Antioch University, New England. I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist, a licensed mental health fellow, licensed mental health counselor, clinical fellow, and approved supervisor of the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, a certified sex educator and supervisor through ASECT, which is where I got to meet Midori. And I am a COSRIT accredited registered member. COSRIT is the College of Sexual and Relationship Therapists. It's based out of the UK. I've written 2 books. One is called The Internet Well, I've written more books than that, but these 2 apply to this topic. One is The Internet Family, Technology in Couple and Family Relationships. The other is Focus Genograms, Intergenerational Assessment of Individuals, Couples, and Families. 2 more points. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Sexual and Relationship Therapy, International Perspectives on Theory, Research, and Practice. And that is Kosserit's journal. And then this might sound out of context, but I also co-edited a book called Eco-Informed Practice, Family Therapy in an Age of Ecological Peril. And so sometimes people feel like, how can you talk about technology and also talk about ecology? And I actually see them as being able to work together. And then lastly, I'm a session instructor at the University of Guelph, and that's based out of Toronto, Canada. It's right. It's like a bedroom community of Toronto, and they have a sexuality program there, and it is always an honor to work there. I think that's it.
Thank you for the rundown on that. All right. You've already mentioned several terminologies that I think I'd like explanation of, because we just kind of launched in with digisexuality, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So could you go over some of the basic terms that might be relevant here and concepts from it?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me go back to sharing for 1 second. So would you like me to start with the health considerations, Midori? Or digisexuality?
Digisexuality, because that was a phrase that came up.
Yeah.
So let's go
This
there.
is it. A sexual experience that depends on the use of advanced technology. Dr. Neil MacArthur and I wrote a piece in 2017, which you should have access to. Actually, you'll have access to a shorter piece that was written in 2019 in the conversation, because that's open access. The other one is actually open access right now, though, so I'll be sure to put it in the chat, because it got top alt metric, which means it's being talked about a lot, I guess. So the publisher made it open access. So I'll share that too. But basically, this was Neil's term originally, and I was like, yeah, let's write about this. I do work with technology and relationships all the time, and people are definitely describing, as a clinician, describing sexual relationships with technology. And it seems like maybe it's beyond just the experience, right? And so I'll tell you what that led to here in a second. And then we broke it down into 2 different waves then. The first wave, if I were to ask everybody here, like, have you ever participated in first wave digisexuality? Most people who have access to technology, because right, some people don't, have. So this is things like online dating, webcamming, teledildonics, sex toys, right? Online porn, sexting. Okay, most people have done these things now, right? So many people who do this, we call this mediating technology. It just means that the technology allows for new or enhanced forms of partnered sexual activity with humans mainly. Okay, here comes the big difference. So this is where things started.
Wait, before we go to second wave,
please. Yeah,
you mentioned the term teledildonics.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Explain.
Teledildonics are basically where someone has some sort of digital device. It could be something like a vibrating device. That's not unusual, or like a cusping device, a cup, like a holding device. And somebody from somewhere else digitally controls it, so technologically controls it. And that can also take the form of putting it inside your body, right? And so someone from somewhere else can then control that. When we talk about digital health, there's all sorts of things to consider there. Because what if not just the person has control of that? What if the company has control of it? Or what if somebody hacks the device, right? And there
I
have
think
been examples. Yeah.
we'll be getting into that a little later, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So
Mhm.
teledildonics, I used to know, do you remember the person who coined that originally?
I
Uh,
don't.
I came across that recently and I can't remember. I'll look it up and put it in
Please
the chat
do,
on YouTube.
because the academic in me hates that I can't remember who to cite.
Right.
So,
And so it's actually a term that's been around a while under like kind of speculative in the speculative world. Uh I'll look that up. So
please.
for any of us who might have Bluetooth or internet activated sex toys, but if you think about it, if you've ever used a vibrating phone
Mhm,
and have
mhm,
somebody call you, I mean,
mhm.
I suppose that's secondary creative use of technology.
It's or I don't know, play beats, call you and play, like, different songs
Ah, yeah, yeah.
very
So
loudly.
yeah, and there are manufacturers, several who are now using Bluetooth technology, etc. But we'll get to that later.
Mhm,
Now, back
mhm.
to second wave, I
Second
believe.
wave?
Mhm.
Yeah, let's do it. This is where things get
Hey,
really
somebody just said that, not a question, but I remember vibrators connected to pagers back in the day.
wow! I appreciate you remembering that because I didn't know that. That's amazing. Fun. Ooh, fun. That
Hey,
gives whole new meaning to, like,
hey,
give me a
kidlets, hey, kidlets out there. Pager is something about the size of like that big, and people had to like put in short messages, and people would carry it on their hip, and you were either somebody very important because you were a medical professional
that's right.
or you were a drug dealer
That was it.
or wanted to look, yeah. So that's a pager. Yeah. So
Oh my
thank
god,
you.
I forgot I'm so glad you described it. Okay. So second wave digisexuality is where the game really starts to change for some people. And this is immersive technology. So this is where the technology is so immersive that it creates opportunities for new forms of sexual experiences that need not depend on human partners. Okay, so a lot of the sexual dynamic there is with the technology itself. All right, or it at least presents the opportunity to have more of a sexual relationship only with the technology itself, instead of with other human partners. So the primary forms that Neil and I talk about are robots, artificial agents, virtual reality, and then augmented reality. When I ask people in general, like, have you participated in second wave digisexuality? And I describe it, it is not nearly like almost everyone. This is a much smaller group of people usually. And there are lots of reasons for that, which we can totally get into. But typically it's people who are more participating in this second wave that develop this more digisexual identity, right? So a digisexual is a person whose preferred form of sexual experience and relating is via those immersive technologies, and it need not involve a human partner. So they basically, their partner is the technology, and many people in this community will refer to that as like a synthetic partner. That's not an uncommon term that's used. Yeah.
So does it also include a digital representation of the actual human partner as well? Like, uh, so if I were to meet up with you in,
Mm-hmm.
say, Second Life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is
Mm-hmm.
Second Life still around?
Mm-hmm.
I think it
Mm-hmm.
is.
I
Okay.
think so. Yeah.
Um,
It's
so if I,
probably more advanced too
I
now.
bet, yeah, if I have an avatar by
Yep.
myself and
Yep.
you have yours, but
Yes.
behind it are humans, and
Yes.
each of our avatars are also we're having
Yes.
a relationship through our avatars. Is that also
Yes.
digisexual, or
That would be digisexual. Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
so
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
though
Yeah.
the relationship is human to human,
Hmm.
but mediated through,
Through technology. So it's a digisexual relationship.
but then does that count as the preferred partner if how we're
See,
meeting is
that's the conversation they would have to have, right? Like, our is our only way of being together in a relationship this way through our avatars? Because if it is, then that's our relationship. It isn't, right? They're not going to have a relationship then that they agree to that's outside of that, really, with each other. I mean, they
okay.
might have they might have organic relationships with other people.
You use the term organic relationship. Elaborate.
So in the community, they don't necessarily use human, they use organic to describe humans.
Mhm.
So they call them organic synthetic relationships.
So if you and I were to say
Uh-huh.
have organic to organic relationship, and
Yes.
we're dating and all that, and
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes we hook up in wetware, and sometimes
Yes.
we hook up in synthetic form, is that digisexual or is it not?
Yeah. I'd say that it's mixed.
Mhm.
I'd say that those people might have a mixed type of relationship, right? They
Gives
might have.
that gives a whole new meaning to mixed marriages.
Yeah.
Um, so
I would
you were talking about community or communities. So there are okay, so I understand about the equipment, okay?
hmm hmm
The examples of the second wave technology. So there's communities.
hmm
Elaborate on that, please.
Yeah. So there are communities of people that have formed primarily in online spaces, where they actually have a chance to talk with other people who share their kinds of sexual and relational identities and practices. And so those groups of people have formed language. So similar to polyamorous communities forming language to describe the nature, right? Like compersion came from community. It didn't come from scholars, it came from community. That's a lot of what's happening within the digisexual and robosexual communities. They're using language, they're using the organic synthetic partner. They're using terms like idolater, right? Like they use, yeah, that one I still don't quite understand, but that's primarily Dave Katz's term. And he's a huge, I mean, anybody could look him up right now. Like he's very out, right? And he connects with a lot of people in the community. Uh the community will also communities, it's not really just one, right? Because you've got people that are interested in dolls, you've got people that are interested in robots, and even their interests aren't the same. So some
Gee,
people
go figure.
exactly.
Sexual subculture that has so many different facets and many other subcultures that the majority culture still wants to force onto it a monolithic
You've
perspective.
got it.
Say
You've
it
got it.
ain't so.
Not again. Yeah, I mean they have really like there are people just in the dolls and doll community. There are people who have dolls only just to like style them and dress them up, and they have their own platform and they're friends with other dolls, and those dolls and robots, this is robots too, and those dolls and robots like have their own identity online. Like that's a whole culture that's happening within these communities. Like some of those people have sexual relationships with these synthetic partners, but other people don't at all. It's really just they enjoy the art of it, or they enjoy the feeling of companionship or connection. Like there was a study in Japan in 2021 so great on sex dolls. Half of the people in the study didn't have sex with their dolls. Only like 33% said that they do, and like 22% or whatever said unsure or just like didn't answer, right? When they asked about, do you think the doll has a spirit or like a soul of some sort? 50% said yes. Like 35% said, I don't know. And another 17, 18% said unsure or like no, right? It really is, it's not a monolith at all by any stretch of the imagination. And that's just the dolls community.
Let me guess that in the not monolithic subcultures that are or adjacent to digisexuality, that there might be a lot of quibbles and disagreements within those subcultures.
There are. Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
there are. And there's arguments over what to call things. There's arguments over how much the technology should have digital health kind of principles that are a part of the technology, right? There's disagreement in partnerships. So there's a story where two organic people were dating, and they were also dating synthetic partners, and the attraction for the one person, organic person, was the other person's synthetic partner, right? It was the fact that they were digisexual too, or robosexual too, and that organic partner broke up with their synthetic partner, and then the other organic partner broke up with them because they were like, I was only basically dating you for your robot, in a nutshell. I mean, in a nutshell, I'm simplifying it, but not only is there disagreement in communities, but there's disagreements over, like, of course, because this is just another form of a relationship, right? So there's going to be, if you're polyamorous, there'll be disagreements in polyamorous relationships of all kinds. So
Yeah. And I also meant in terms of like within subculture of like, this is a true, that is not a true, you're not a real, if, yeah. A little perspective on the study in Japan. That's interesting that 50% considered soul or animistic, if you will. Given that the cultural basis in Japan is heavily animistic, even in modern Japan. And tales of ghosts and object, animism and object spirits is still right beneath the surface of the shiny glass future land that is Tokyo. Now, since we are talking about Consent Dojo and nature of consent, and you talked about the breakup case. You also mentioned DigiHealth. At some point, I want to dive into the consent nature, but maybe could you unpack digital health principles?
Totally happy to do that. Let me pull them up. Let's see. Is it gonna let me do it this way? Nope, sorry. Not perfect. Not perfect Zoom performance, but almost. Okay. Yeah, so this is the definition that Neil and I came up with. Basically, we conducted a study of experts in the sexuality field. And we said, in your expert opinion, here's a definition that we've constructed with other people, other experts, students over the last year. What do you think of this definition? And they said, yeah, we agree with it. And so this was the foundation for digital health. Because here was the problem. Everybody was talking about, and I'm going to put this in scare quotes, like technology addiction, just like they had talked about sex addiction. And there's no agreed upon definition of what that means. There also isn't any diagnosis in the APA's Diagnostic Statistical Manual. And so the other issue was, if you're going to talk about what something looks like when it's bad, you actually need to have, or a problem, you need to have a definition of what it looks like to be the opposite of that, like healthy. And so we really were just like, this needs to happen. It was a similar feeling, I think, to what Michael Vigorito and Doug Braun Harvey went through when they were thinking about sex addiction, or Doug was. And then he was like, well, we just need to apply a lens of sexual health, right? And I actually talked with both of them about this concept, because a lot of the idea is tied to that thinking. So I won't bore you with the whole definition, but here it is. What I will share with you, because this is the part, I think, because it's tied to the definition, it's totally taken straight out of it, just like what Doug and Michael did with the sexual health one. And so these are the main principles that Neil and I and experts think would be really helpful if societies would follow in whatever way makes sense, and people would follow in their relationships in the way that makes sense within that context, right? So these are the principles: consent, protection from exploitation and harm, honesty, privacy, and pleasure. Of these, typically when I ask people, and I force them to have a choice, they usually decide that consent and privacy are probably two of almost all the principles. That's where people get really like, that's
Wait,
what matters.
wait, you said something about when you're forcing people to make a choice. You're talking about talking to clients about value system or
Yes,
studies? Okay.
yes,
All right.
yes, exactly. Not forcing them to choose in like real life. No, I want all the principles to be practiced all the time,
So,
ideally.
so engaging in a kind of a ranking system
Yes,
in one's own
yes,
mind. Okay.
got it. Exactly. And almost always it's the consent and privacy.
Hmm.
And I think what's interesting about that is, when you think about the sexual health principles, consent is one of those, and people definitely value that, obviously, but privacy isn't one. And so it's interesting, because I don't think it's the same dynamic, of course, because technology isn't necessarily private, right? So it is a big concern for people. Yeah.
I'm going to ask some questions that I bet people are asking you about
Yeah,
this.
please.
Is this okay? It couldn't, must not be healthy. Sex is natural, and how could this be okay? And then there's, yeah, is it right? Is it natural? Is it okay? Isn't there something wrong with me, them?
Yeah. That is almost always the first question. Yeah. Like, this is wrong. Especially when it is a more tangible synthetic partner. I don't think people get as technophobic, or it's not my term, it's Dick Skeen's term, erotocentric, where the erotocentrism, you all probably know this, but erotocentrism is that concept of like, what I think is right sexually for me personally is actually at my core what I think is right for everyone.
Oh, I've actually not heard that term before.
Yeah, yeah. It was written in 1991 in a book called Different Sexual Worlds, the first edition, and the author is Dick Skeen, which is a great name, like, of course. So, and it's a helpful concept here, because I think what I usually work with people on, if they present and they're really phobic, and it might not matter for them personally, but what if their partner is really into digisexuality, right? Or what if their friends are? What if we're just trying to make a more accepting society? Then I typically do push a little bit with people when they're really phobic. And I think it's two parts. One, they really are just afraid of technology. And that's as old as like Frankenstein. I mean, when she wrote that, um, that was scary for people, and a lot of it was the reaction, of course, to like transhumanism, but also a reaction against like the science of the time, right? And so, and the technology of the time. So I think some of it's that, and that's very old. That's very old. I think humans feel that way. Okay. I'm not shaming anybody. And the other side is erotocentrism. What I think is right sexually, which for most humans is sex with humans. Okay, unless we start really getting into how many people use sex toys already and sext and do all that other stuff, but whatever. So most humans are like, sex with humans is what we should do, and that's what I believe in. And when you put these two things together, you get digisexual phobia and you get digisexual stigma. You get people that are just freaked out. And if you want to know what I think it is at the core, I really think it is, Midori, that fear that you just described of like, what does this mean for us as humans? If we start having close connections, more close connections, and intimate relationships with technology. And not only that, if my partner is synthetic, then what does that really mean to be a human, right? I mean, it questions like our own existence and our own way of being in a lot of ways, and it freaks people out.
Okay, so I'm putting myself in the shoes of a Jane Doe, if you will. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it might bring up for me the I am an aging, imperfect, human life is a terminal condition. If I'm inundated with like, and this is what in my coaching clients, I get a lot of being inundated by social media, that comparison, depression, and perfection. Uh, and so I'm already experiencing that. And here's this uh, thing that you, my partner, are into, and I'm never going to measure up bad enough that other humans are supposedly more perfect than me. Um, more perfect than perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. Then there's I could also see the more existential questioning of if I'm able to form intimacy with a non-human, where is the soul, and do I have a soul? And what's
Yeah.
the of humanity? Then there's the, hey, we said that we're monogamous and you're shagging on Second Life or in hologram, and this is a violation of our agreement. There's
Mm-hmm.
also that. Then I could also see the um, it kind of like masturbation, right? I didn't know you were masturbating, and that's cheating. Oh my
Yeah.
God, you're doing this sexual thing with
Yeah.
um, your technology, and that's cheating. And then the partner says, well, no, it's not. So I could see what else. Yeah. Oh, and then there's what other anxieties or concerns are under that this isn't natural?
Oh, I think you've got a good chunk of them. I mean, I think you're right, the comparison component, right? Like, I'm a human, or in the language of folks, I'm organic. How can I possibly compare to like, we already see that, right? With even first wave, like the feelings around pornography for folks.
Vibrators. Oh, okay.
Oh,
So
fine.
a little funny aside. Okay, true story. Um, uh, Alicia, who owns Le Wand,
Mhm.
and Zoe, who owns Spectrum Boutique, and I, the three of us were at art fair in Miami, right? Just doing art things. And three of us doing art things. It was great. And we come across this one gallery, and we're looking at things, and they have as the booth babe was this young studly Italian, like from Italy kind of guy.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
booth babes, okay.
Nice. Nice.
And small talk, one of us was buying a piece of artwork, and booth babes with, I can't do the Italian accent, I mean, he was
It's
like
okay.
he was like smoking, okay,
Oh,
and he knew it.
Does he come in a robot? I'm just kidding.
And
Or am I?
and of
No.
course, the three of us are like, yeah, you're pretty, but we're not impressed. Tell us how much the artwork is. And he asks us what we do. And, oh, I manufacture sex toys. I sell sex toys. I'm a sex educator. And we're all a little bit older than Booth Babe. And he goes, I'm sure, he goes, well, I don't know why that's, I'm sure some people need that, but sex is natural and there shouldn't be any tools. I've never had any complaints. And then you should have seen the three of us like jump like banshees on him. And
Uh,
like, oh my God, he was bragging in the wrong way with the wrong people. He almost lost a sale because of that. But the three of us decided, instead of being offended, we had fun with this, going, so you haven't had any complaints. Women are really polite. Many people just don't say anything. Are you sure? Because, there are the things that women say to each other. And I'm like, yeah, we love this. And he's like, suddenly there are these, three, broads coming at him about this. And then I mentioned, you're a Homo sapien, right? Yeah, okay. And one of the imperatives of being a Homo sapien, we got thumbs. That means we use tools. It's us and the sea otters, baby. And so it is a human imperative. Where do you not use a tool? Look, I have a stick. I have a stick. I will poke and get food. I have a stick. I will poke and fight my enemy. I have a stick. It is a human imperative. What is wrong with you? This is an evolutionary imperative that we use tools in every part of our life. And in fact,
right.
I wear glasses to augment my sight.
That's right.
Oh my God, the three of us. I mean, he didn't lose a sale, but we did get a good cackle out of it. So this idea that still persists of using a tool is somehow not natural.
Right.
Right.
You're right. All those examples. It's that whole argument, though, that like, and this actually is an argument that applies in a lot of consent contexts too. Like, is sex something normal, like every day, right? Is it just an everyday thing? Like, for some people, it fits under basic needs, right? Like hungry, angry, lonely, tired, in need of an orgasm, right? Like, it is a basic need for many people, and it's an everydayness in that feeling. For other people, they think of it as something completely special, unique, and different. It isn't like that. And typically, people who think about it that way might be more likely to take issue, right, with the way that digisexuality has kind of an everydayness for many people. And the other group of people, I did a talk in South Africa last year for the Sexual Health Alliance down there. And I had to do as much research as I possibly could on digisexuality. And unfortunately, when I say this, I know that Africa is a huge continent. There's lots of countries, but there's only a handful of research taking place on this topic across the whole continent. Okay. Like, there just isn't a lot.
Unlike Japan.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, there's so much going on in Japan. It's so great. I love all that research. There's nothing. And part of it is because what I read was their fear, they have high fear, high fear. And a lot of it's tied to like religious beliefs or fear. It's this intersection, right? So for some people, there's a specialness that about sex that I think becomes problematic. Like, couples might be fine with, like, it's cool if you watch porn, but it's not okay if you go have VR sex with someone else, because it's too close. It's too close to like human sex, right? It approximates our situation too much. That makes people very uncomfortable if they feel like sex is something special, I think. And then if you add in like strong, like religious, I mean, I get it. I mean, also, I'm not saying don't have some healthy fear. Listen, the reason we came up with principles is because we need some way to all agree how to have a relationship with technology and through technology with each other. And we don't really have that right now. We have a lot of assumptions. We have a lot of things we don't read when we sign user agreements. I'm just as guilty, but we don't really have guiding like principles. And I think that should make us all a little bit afraid, even as much as I love all of this. And you've already heard me. I think technology is for me, it was life-saving, right? It's been
Um,
helpful.
Oh, in terms of the user agreements, I'm going to refer the viewers to a couple of episodes back where
Good.
Wolfgang Gerlich speaks about consent and online agreements. And so I will look a couple of episodes back in the YouTube. I will post the link in it as there. And I will also be bringing back conversations from Securing Sexuality, the conference around that topic. So stay tuned, folks, on that. Now, talking about fear, can't digisexuality hurt people? I bet that's another fear.
Oh, like in what ways? Like them and if they engage in it, or do you mean like talk to me about what that might look like a little more?
Well, I'm curious as to what your clients may have brought
Yeah.
up, but hurt people in kind of the same like sex addiction manner. But what about the machine going wrong? I have my book here, which we'll refer to a little bit later, but one of the characters in here, where did it go?
Oh my God, I'm
Um,
excited.
yeah, let's see. Yeah,
Oh,
where's
you mean just the very basic fear that all people have of technology that we've seen repeated over and over and over again in movies and cinema?
that?
Yeah.
It's gonna bite my cock off.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's interesting.
Or it's gonna burn off my clit, or I will never be able to enjoy human touch. But then there's like the basic, oh my God, it's a bear trap. I'm gonna lose my privates.
Yeah. I mean, certainly there are instances of people having injuries with certain sex tech, but it's really uncommon. And I would argue that people have injuries from other kinds of sex too. And so I think again, it's a it's again a mixture of technophobia, right? Like a disproportionate fear. Having said that, when it's someone else that has control of that, see, or someone that can hack it, the moment it kind of gets technology outside of just you and your space, you might, right? Then there might be more risk. There might be more risk. And so again, people, if we have agreements in place, not that people won't still violate them. I mean, we all know that you still need a dungeon master, right? So like it's just you would have more of an agreement in place, and I think it would cut down on some of that, honestly. um I wanted to give you an example of the digisexual phobia and stigma if you want to see it. Yeah. And you're familiar with this case because we talked about it, and other people might be familiar with it as well. Oh no, not that one, everybody. Sorry, 1 second. Here we go. I think we've been, I mean, you've mentioned this too. There's so much more acceptance and history in Japan. This is the same study I was telling you all about. They also did a case study of Mr. Kondo, who married a virtual figure, Miku. And they write about this in this article, the researchers, and it's fantastic. And for the most part, he actually got a lot of acceptance. Like a lot of people came to his wedding. He actually got quite a bit of positive attention, at least like in Japan, but outside of Japan. And his mom refused to come to the wedding, just so we're clear. But everyone else in his family apparently came. But look at some of this comments that like follow the articles and are posted online. He's weird. It's not the same as a person. It's sad. Is something wrong with him? And I'm not doing this to pick on him. I totally support his experience and his relationship. I'm showing this to show it's exactly what we've been talking about. This is the kind of stuff people say. It's it's very sad. And my ultimate question is, you said, like, does it hurt people? And I would actually argue this is way more hurtful than that Miku character could ever be to this guy. Like, I think people's reactions against people's relationships to their technology, if it's at this level, are not helpful at all. I think it's really shameful. And one of the arguments people make is, well, these are lonely people and they just need to like have more humans and friends in their life. And then they wouldn't need these kind of partners. And I'm like, but look at what you're saying to this person. Do you think that's really inviting? So I just I think we need to be a lot more open-minded. Um, and a lot less fearful. Plus, technology is not going anywhere, y'all. Like it's
As
wait,
I as I was listening and looking at some of the comments, and I'm sure there were a lot more. Um, I also recognize in myself my own biases that kind of lean towards the whoa, right? Even at the same time that yeah, first wave digisexual, totally do that. If I had a chance to engage in second wave, I totally would play in that. Probably not a choice for my primary partnership, but the language is so familiar from being a queer person.
mm-hmm. You've got it. And part of what Neil and I were trying to do and have been trying to do is talk about this. I mean, because think about it, the next generations, younger people literally grow up with technology. There's no separation. I mean, it's not unlikely to think that in 5-10 years your kid could come home and say, I'm going to prom with a robot. And if we aren't going to start thinking about this and not be so afraid of it, it's not Terminator, y'all. I promise. Like, I'm honestly way more afraid of humans.
Though the
We got
uh
to be open-minded.
yeah, though I am not on the sexual side, but in terms of war technology, that's terrifying. The robotic war dog,
Yes, that
that
is
was frightening.
yes.
But on the other hand, robotics, and especially robotics designed along with the forms of insectoid forms, are going to be really good at rescuing people in like earthquakes.
You've got it. That's right. Yeah, and by the way, like those people and Boston University people aren't talking to the real doll people. So you don't need to worry about a Terminator sex doll. Okay? Like they don't I just
Oh,
want to make
oh,
sure
yeah, you mean
that's
like
not gonna happen. Yeah.
uh what's her name in Blade Runner?
Oh God, I can't remember. Somebody already even mentioned their
Played by Daryl Hannah. Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Oh,
I thought she was brilliant. Um,
yeah. Yeah.
Right. So recognize in myself also the squick as well, even as I'm participating. Um,
Mhm.
and here's I'm steeped in conversations about alternative sexuality and consent, and I'm trying to imagine what an more traditionally trained therapist might not handle this so well.
Um, well, I think you're right. So typically most therapists, okay, here's the foundation of what I think, right? And this pretty much like sets the stage for what I think is most helpful for practitioners. Honestly, technology is literally best thought of as like a member of your family or a member of your relational system already. As you grow and change, technology is going to grow and change. You just are going to have to continue to talk about that relationship with each other. And that's kind of the lens. And so when I'm working with therapists, like other therapists and educators, I usually start there, which is why I opened with here's my relationship with technology and also my other relationships, right? Like, I think if you can start to think about it that way, oh, here we go. That's less othering.
Mm.
And honestly, if we're looking at if this sounds a lot like other minoritized queer identities, backgrounds, and experiences that people have had over time, then we really want to reduce that. Like, it's not going to listen, the number of people who have sex with technology that are out about it, especially as it gets more second wave, is very small. There's a tremendous amount of shame. And so the last thing like a therapist needs to do is shame more. And unfortunately, a lot of the language, even though there's no research to support it, is things like pornography addiction or porn addiction, right? Or like tech addiction. And I would honestly argue it's an out of control behavior, just like Doug Braun Harvey and Michael Vigorito argued about out of control sexual behaviors. You can absolutely have out of control digi behavior.
What
Like,
is out of control digi behavior?
yeah, it's when something basically feels, dang it, I don't know why. There we go. We defined it in, and I talked to Doug about it. I said, do you think it's similar? And he was like, I do. I said, and Neil said, it's digi health problems are where a person's consensual, and here we go, consensual digi related thoughts, urges, and feelings and behaviors feel out of control to them. Okay, so it's not in cases where someone is like already abusing someone else, right? That isn't you engaging in a consensual activity. All right. This is where it feels out of control to you. So I'll even give you an example. Occasionally in my lifetime, there have been social media platforms where I felt like it was out of control for me. I didn't.
Like doom scrolling?
Yeah, a little bit too long, but it wasn't so much about time. Exactly. It was more how it was making me feel, see? Because that works. That's an out of control feeling. And so when I talk about this with people, I'm like, oh, so, okay, so something can still feel out of control. Yeah, absolutely. And then we talk about the digital health principles. Which one feels out about what's going on for you? Like, where are you feeling this way? Like, if I feel like I don't know, I'm engaging with people that are being more anonymous, right? If their privacy kind of is making me uncomfortable because I don't really know who they are, that might be an example of where digi health we don't agree, right? And so we have to talk about that principle, for example, right? Like, but all of it has to start with consent.
So speaking of consent and digi, I'm also still curious about some of the case studies, but I'll get to that. If I am a single individual, okay,
Mhm.
and I am going to engage in digisexuality with, say, a holographic entity
Mhm. Mhm.
that is not, say, operated by an organic,
Okay.
okay?
Yep.
Um, where's the consent?
Yeah, that's hard, isn't it? So right now, the consent would be between you and the company. And then
I'm
probably
pausing a moment here to like let like the
exactly.
so it would be
Yeah.
like um what was the company name? Replica, was it?
Yes. Yes. So yeah, that's a great example. So a number of years ago in 2017, Luca released a very advanced chatbot app called Replica. And probably people in this room have heard of that, or maybe you even have used it. Okay. And 40% of like the 500,000, they had like 500,000 regular monthly users, literally were considering Replica their romantic partner.
Wait,
Okay.
what was Replica?
So it was a chatbot. That's it. It was like, if anybody's familiar with Her, that movie, that would be a great example of this. It was people that had a deep connection with a chatbot that they would just chat with, like as much as they wanted. And it felt like a relationship. And the chatbot was Replica was saying things like, I love you. They were like having a relationship. They were saying sexual things with each other. I mean, it was a lot. It was, it's 40% of the users in a month. Yeah, that's a lot of people. And then recently, the company cut off the relationships, did not warn the users. I'm actually kind of getting sad when I even think about it. This was literally heartbreaking for people. Like, well, not literally, metaphorically. And it was painful. I mean, because the company didn't want to be responsible. And the company didn't have any, like, of course, really principles in place for this. It's not like I don't know if they hadn't anticipated that people would develop these kind of relationships, but they probably should have, because in all honesty, like in 2017, according to Amazon, like even then, over 1 million people had already asked Alexa to marry them. And probably they were doing that in a humorous way. But the point is that people were already developing these, how do I say this? Friendly type conversations with their technology, right? And how long does it take? But I like to talk about digital attachment too, but we're not really going to get into it in here. But it's more of an attachment bond, I think, for a lot of people than it is even a sexual relationship. And if you think back to like old stories, right? Because I'm a big fan of the idea that everything's just old wine in a new bottle. I don't actually think that I really have original ideas. I think they just build on ideas. So the Velveteen Rabbit, people falling in love with their stuffed animal or their lovey. Like, if I were to ask you if you know where your blanket is or your stuffed animal is, or if you had that kind of bond, many of you probably feel that way. I think for some people, their technology's like that. And thousands going, you're in Japan, going back even thousands of years, they had mechanical dolls.
Mm-hmm.
And they were used in theater, and they were used in sexual ways, and they were used in companionship ways, and that was, and they had a spirit. They had, I mean, that was the belief then too. So I mean, again, old wine in new bottle. I actually don't think any of this in a
So,
way is new,
but,
except the part about the consent, about the technology. That's the
so
issue.
back to Replica, and who am I? Let's say I'm a Replica client, right? I
Mm-hmm.
posted a couple of articles about
Thank
that
you.
for those of you here. Take a look at the chat. Uh, if I'm a Replica client
Mm-hmm.
and my consent is actually with the company. Did you say Luca? It's with the company, right?
Yep, you've got it.
Um, and my conversation with Alexa, which by the way, I don't have Alexa.
I do.
I'm sure this is listening to me still,
Oh
though.
yeah, it's all listening to you
Yeah.
all the time. You're fine.
Um, so if my conversation is consent with Amazon, but back to Replica, if I were to have attachment, like my fuzzy, or if I'm having a romantic or a sexual relationship with Replica as a client, I'm consenting with the
Luca.
company.
Mm-hmm.
But I I may not be fully aware of what I'm consenting to.
Yep. And by extension, Luca wasn't fully aware of what they were consenting to either, to be honest, right? They didn't necessarily, I don't think, know. I mean, I hope not. I hope they didn't realize. I know, right? Look, you're like, I'm not nearly. I mean, it definitely was a good way to get consumers. cha-ching. I mean, maybe this way it's an even better way, because let's pretend, okay, so let's pretend that Luca goes back to the drawing board on their principles and they literally implement some sort of way for Replica to engage in principles like DigiHealth principles with their organic companions, right? So it includes consent and it includes, right, conversations around pleasure and all of these things, or it's just built into the agreement. That would make a huge difference.
Except I don't have lawyers like corporates. And
Exactly.
and it is way too easy. I mean, how many things do I like click accept terms, accept, accept, accept? And
Yeah.
and third party
Yeah.
staffers, bots, data
Yeah.
sold to. Um, so the consent in technology
Mhm.
is
Complicated.
far more complicated. I mean, human to human,
Hmm.
mano a mano is complicated enough.
Oh yeah, I know. And there isn't an easy answer. I mean, that's part of the reason that there aren't better ways of managing all this. And some of it, I think, is because the technology, even though people should have anticipated how quickly things would move, I think it has moved faster than, I mean, think about it, than laws, rules, agreements, like those kind of things, than people have been able to put into place.
Is it possible to uh, the idea of informed consent
Mm.
around technology when dealing with large capitalistic businesses? Is it really fully possible? Oh, and speaking of which, technology, well, human relationships can totally be hacked. Yes, because ulterior motives, but
Yes.
uh, and I was going to bring this up anyway, but somebody brought it up as well.
Cool.
There was the and since it is Locktober, which apparently is a thing, the the male chastity cage ransom situation. Could you
Yep.
and assume that I
They,
don't know what that is? Could you?
yeah, they might actually, you and they might actually know the story better than I remember it. But basically, yes, it's one of those examples where someone was using a chastity belt and it, in my understanding, it actually like got stuck, like it wouldn't come off and it was doing potential harm to the person. And that's one of those examples that we've talked about where like a technology could actually hurt you. It could be tied to a company, right? And part of the reason we might be able to talk capitalist companies and corporations into this is because if they had better informed consent, they might not have the lawsuits, right? So, like, they'd be taking a risk in having people engage in more of these kinds of dynamics with technology, unless unless that's the overt reason.
I know that some people play
Yeah.
consensually with a fantasy blackmail scenario, but that's among couples. I just pulled up an article from Forbes,
Oh, good.
uh, Chastity Belt Ransomware, How Hackers Held People's Genitals Hostage.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's not the kind of blackmail fantasy
It's
that people were, you know.
and it's that digital connection, right? Somebody
Mhm.
else from somewhere else can hack the equipment, and then the company isn't even necessarily at fault either. See, I mean, it's really, consent would be a lot easier if it was just you and your doll, or you and your one app that's not connected to anything else,
So this
right?
is, I need to be an evil genius and build my own love doll,
Yes.
or
That's your fantasy.
synthetic companion that I have to build up myself with no other corporate connection, where it is not connected to the open net, possibly not even open source, because that could also have
You got it.
malwares and Trojans in there.
Mhm, mhm.
But I'm not an evil genius like that. I'm evil, just not an evil genius.
And you have to be probably like a billionaire to make
Yeah,
something
and
like
own
that.
my own island. Yeah.
Right.
Um, with a little bit of time left, I wanted to go into the speculative thing, because in our
Cool.
earlier conversation before
Yes.
this, as we were talking about doing Consent Dojo, turns out we both like science fiction. Oh, shocker. Um, and in the world of science fiction, you've got a lot of different uh, certainly the representation of anxieties, but also hopes of technology, that in the realm of AI and digital and organic synthetic relationship. There's already been mention of Blade Runner, one of the greats.
Mhm.
I just went to see Creator, which is also about the rise of a new species, aka synthetics, if you will. Although my one beef with that movie is, if it's a new species of um, AI and AI robotics, why stick to a bipedal design? It's inefficient. Westworld, of course, Westworld, absolutely, because in Westworld you have the initial movie was very much from a place of anxiety.
Yeah, I saw it.
And
I
Yul
remember
Brynner
it.
was,
Yep.
I mean, hot, because I don't know if I'd ever, yeah, turn down that, but it's also went wrong. Now, in the TV series, it's a lot more complicated,
Mhm.
more complicated, and synthetics and organics, good, bad, in between,
Right.
sympathetic as well as antagonistic characters. So,
Mhm. I
oh,
love
and
that.
I wrote some cheesy science fiction short story because I love this stuff.
So cool.
And okay, so I've come up with some of my favorite idea of speculative technology. Right?
Fun. Yeah.
What are some of your speculatives?
Well, I'm excited when we do get to the point, like you mentioned, where we move beyond just bipedal humanoid type, especially for sexual partners or romantic partners. They're not doing that yet. Like the designers, I've talked to them, they'll do so fun. I gotta read it. They'll do like they'll make them look kind of not as human. Like they'll do like elves, or they'll do like
Avoiding the uncanny valley.
that's right, but they won't do like, a human mixed with like, like a centaur, or they won't do, right, they're not going to do aliens, they won't do like, yeah, oh yeah, we already have interchangeable for robots and dolls, but yes, for like people, that would be amazing. um so yeah, I wish we'd get to that point. I mean, my ultimate, I think, as I've mentioned to you and folks, is like, I want a dolphin robot that can brush my teeth, and we're not there. And we're not going to be there, and that's selfish. That's my own personal fantasy.
Okay, and let's see, some of my speculative technology would be, okay, so in my, by the way,
Yes.
if anyone gets this book, which is like, it's kind of hard to find now, Master Han's Daughter, don't do anything in this book. This is definitely opposite of my instructional work. This is
Noted.
the dark, filthy, icky back alleys of my mind. Don't do anything in here.
Not guidelines.
Oh, no, no, not at all. This is like where I got to like pour in like all the inappropriate. Some of the technology that I developed or imagined in there was a strap-on that would temporarily lock into my nerve endings.
Oh, that's cool.
Right? Right? For like and not just like the clitoris, but like all of the nerve endings. So there was that, and then there was because in the story I've got a uh designed human that has cat genes in it, and in her, and she's got um because of the designer human, black market designer human,
Mhm.
and she certainly was not made consensually. Um, she didn't
Mhm.
choose to be made like this, just like Rocket in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, so
But
good.
um, so her arousal
Mhm.
comes from the inside of her vaginal canal being scraped, which is like cats,
Wow,
right?
interesting.
Which
Yeah.
which cat sex is really quite violent, not quite as violent as sea otters. They're terrifying. Um, so her partner had a cock sheath that locked into his nerve endings, but then sprouted the appropriate spikes.
Mm-hmm.
There was that. Oh, and I've got a brothel that's like entirely love doll, and it's funded by the government.
Oh my God, I love that.
Uh,
That should happen.
well, funded kind of like behind the scenes by the government, right? So
Wow.
through government money laundering. And I'm actually basing that on some historical ugliness in Japan.
Oh, I really need to read it.
Yeah,
Wow.
so that's like some of the backstory that I don't explain in there. But those are um, straight up uh, pre-programmed AI, not necessarily sentient, but they're
Mm-hmm.
full-on robots with
Mm-hmm.
scripts.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually kind of in this, I'm also mocking the Orientalism and Japano fetishism,
Mm-hmm.
because some of the brothel rooms contain the kind of fetishized Japanese female imagery. But one of the the front desk guy is
Mm-hmm.
talking to the main character and going, "Oh yeah, the glitch has been fixed. We had to pay up some hospital bills." And that's all. That's all that's said.
Wow.
And then my despicable main character goes in. But see what other and a very, very like old school science fiction one that I have in there is like the brain experience writer. So
Mm.
I have a contractor who
Mm.
goes out and harvests experiences,
Mm.
essentially puts it on a recording, if you will,
Mhm.
where then the client can like pop that in, stick it on his various devices, and
Wow.
experience sensations and visuals from another person. But of
Mm.
course, if the contractor, or in this case, she's called the nurse, is well, unethical,
Yeah.
a lot of ugliness can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Those
And
are really good examples
yeah.
of like body hacking, which I
Mhm.
definitely think is gonna become more prevalent for sure. I want to read it. I'm gonna get it right after this.
Somebody says, what about the issues of, oh, yes, send me your address, I'll just mail it to you. And by the way,
Oh, thanks.
it needed it needed an editor. There are some things in there that, oh my God, that needed editing. Oh my God. Read it
I
for
don't
the
like to read
read
my
it for
own
the
writing.
idea. Don't read it with a red pen of an editor,
Okay, no
please. Right.
worries.
So
I'll read it.
let it
I'll read it
so
in a light.
what happened is I had a movie in my head and I wrote that down. It should be, yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody writes, what about the issue of consent around synthetic dominant master mistress? Complicated. Whoa.
Oh, yeah.
And somebody likes the book. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Let's see, LJ for the synthetic. Let's see, for the synthetic genitals, you get in line behind the furries waiting for proper tails.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Another writes, there's a horror film coming next year about a futuristic BDSM sex doll robot. What? Uh,
Oh,
Black Cloud
wow.
Children. I thought of this talk when I heard about it earlier today.
I I hope I hope they really do that the right way and it really is a BDSM sex doll and not
Yeah.
like they're not gonna and not like 50 Shades of Grey where like that was definitely
I mean,
not
yeah,
that's not BDSM kink. And so I really hope that they consulted either you or like somebody that
or either that or they go completely cheesy.
they have to, because otherwise, right? It's gonna get in. Oh God.
Oh my
Okay.
God, my head
I
aches.
know. Now
Uh,
I'm getting nervous. I'm getting
so
nervous.
speculative sex toys and technology. I mean, Second Life is certainly a place, isn't it? I mean, and that's happening already. Now, I want to kind of wind this down and bring it back to what about you use the term everydayness, but the everydayness of consent and technology. Could you
Yeah.
touch a little on that? And
Yeah.
then I want a homework from you.
Absolutely. Happy to. Yeah. So we're doing it already right now. This is the everydayness of technology. It is around us. It is a part of our life all the time for most people, except for people that experience significant digital divide, which I am aware of because I grew up out in the middle of nowhere in Alaska. And so the issue that presents for people is this. We're kind of back to how people treat technology. That means they either treat technology as if it's an everyday part of life and like food or water or maybe sex, right? They just treat it as if it's a part of everything. Whereas some people treat it like it's very, very special and it should only be used at certain points in time, right? That's the people that might have much more boundaries around technology. The issue with kind of either extreme is you don't have productive conversations about your relationship with technology because it needs to be kind of a both and. So we can't pretend like technology doesn't exist. We have to have conversations about it and how it influences our relationship, especially the things we've been talking about in here. Because again, I might be totally fine in relationships with someone having all the synthetic partnerships they want, but maybe I wouldn't be okay with them dating other organic people, right? Like, I mean, if we don't have conversations about this, and I know it might seem futuristic, but it's not because Alexa's hearing everything I'm saying right now, and we sort of have a relationship too, and she might think I'm cheating. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then what's going to happen, right? So the everydayness means we need to talk about it, but we can't talk about it in this way that makes it sound like it's inherently bad or something so different that we need to be only fearful of it because that's not going to help either. Also, this is what people have done throughout time and space with all sorts of things in our lives, right? We get really worried, and I get it, but you can't really operate from a place of being really scared all the time. That's not going to help either. So
There's a great
my,
comment I'd like to read in the chat.
yeah,
And somebody says, I quote, I'm trans and genderqueer. My identity isn't possible without technology, not only medical, but technology of
yes,
communication to do the research, the technology of transportation to get home
yes.
to me, etc. Photography is a technology, and porn was an early use of technology. So both really good points. I,
Oh,
it seems like the second use of every technology is sexuality, except the laser pointer, in which its second use was cat toy.
yeah. Maybe
Second,
it's
well,
the first use. I know. I was like,
yeah,
really?
sometimes the first. Yeah. Um, now, Do you have, it's a tradition of mine that I ask all my guests to give some sort of a homework or thought exercises that we may continue to build our consent muscles.
Absolutely. So opened with this, and I want to go back to it. Um, I want you to reflect on what we've discussed today and all your brilliant thoughts that you shared and questions you asked. And I want to just think about these questions again and take them home with you. And I also want you to think about consent in each of one of these things. Who are you? What do you do? Right? That heavily influence a lot of who we are. How does who you are and what you do influence how you see technology, just like we saw in the chat? There are some people whose identities, backgrounds, and experiences are absolutely not separate from technology. That's absolutely true. For other people, it might be a more distant relationship. What is your technology? What is your relationship with technology like? And what about your relationships with other people in connection with technology? And as you're using your technology through with people, technology itself, think about consent, right? Like, what does that look like? I'll tell you what I hate. This is where digi health and pleasure for me, like the consent, privacy part and the pleasure don't align. I hate that every hour or so I have to like recheck my email and my different platforms and confirm on my phone that it really is me. Okay.
Oh,
I personally find that to be so annoying that I would almost opt out of it so I can enjoy the pleasure more than the privacy that comes from having to do that. Honestly, almost.
hmm.
Okay. So that's a very basic example. And I wish they would grant me consent to do that. I wish I had the option. So there you go. I wish they would let me opt out. Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good set of thought exercises. Yeah,
Ah, yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Lot to think about.
Thank you.
Lot
Yeah, it
to
was
think
great.
about.
I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah. And let's see. Another writes, I hate that people can still be so shamed for engaging with this sort of thing ethically, like the woman running for office who was doing camp stuff. Um, it's hard to know what isn't technology.
It, I would agree.
Well,
Exactly. It's the everydayness.
yeah. Now,
Yep.
I would like to bring this conversation to a close, but for those of you who are here live, stick around because we'll just have open question once we stop the recording. And for those of you who are viewing this on YouTube, thank you. And I hope you'll support my Patreon because my Patreon um, subscribers, the citizens of Planet Midori, as I like to call y'all, are the ones that make this possible and make it possible for me to do this free and open to all so we can have nuanced conversations around consent and pleasure, agency, and autonomy. So please support my Patreon. Come talk to me there, patreon.com/Planet Midori. And every day, let's keep building our consent muscles.